Beep beep, Richie.
Hello friends, and welcome to another marvelous video where we explore the terrifying character It, the legendary work of the legend himself, Stephen King. Yes, this episode is totally dedicated to the infamous clown who creates chaos around the town of Derry. With wild red hair and green pom-poms, Pennywise is just It's other form to lure its victims. But the character is complex and more than just a dancing clown who uses trickery to trap its victims. It has motivation and desires that are never fully explained, and the mystery only adds to its frightening aura. So in today's video, we will explore every detail about this madman of a character and take a peek at its origin. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. So thank you, and let's begin. What exactly is the It creature, and what are its origins? In Stephen King's novel It, the origin of the entity known as Pennywise the Dancing Clown is much more complex and fantastical than the simple story of an evil clown preying on children. According to the novel, Pennywise is an ancient cosmic entity that is older than the universe itself. This entity, known as the Deadlights, has the power to drive those who gaze upon it insane. It initially originated from a void known as the Macroverse, and eventually came crashing down towards the Earth as a fireball. If you want to visualize it, you could think of it as a smaller meteor. In the book, the void is described as a bundle of orange lights. Humans can go completely insane and even lose the stability of their minds if they look into it directly. The only person to look at the void and yet survive is the wife, Audra. But in the movie adaptation, the person to survive is Beverly. She sees the deadlight when Pennywise opens his jaw widely while revealing his true form, having 1,000 gross teeth. By looking at the lights, Beverly can see another dimension that is far beyond the human world. The subtle hint of the dead light is given throughout the movie, as Pennywise's eyes are often seen to be glowing in an orange color. The entity came to Earth in prehistoric times and began taking on the form of various frightening creatures. It holds the ability to shapeshift and thus trigger emotions of fear to get a firm hold on its prey. But the question is, why terrorize the prey instead of just simply kidnapping and hunting? The answer is not simple at all. One of the factors is that when humans are terrified, the chemicals of terror goes into the meat. So it preferred to trigger fear among children who are scared of simpler things instead of adults. See, adults' thought processes are a bit complex, and so is their fear. So it is just easier to petrify the children. Another aspect is that the entity does not really consume the kids, but feeds on their fears to make itself more powerful. It does not always spare the adults of Derry, but as long as they do not interfere with the attacks on the children, they probably will be just fine. But then again, the fate of your life depends on Pennywise's mood, whether you are an adult or a child. Over time, the entity took on the form of a clown and made its home in the town of Derry, Maine. As the kids referred to the entity as it took this name and appeared mostly as the dancing clown. It believes that nothing else can petrify the children as much as a scary-looking clown. Its way to prey on its victims is to use their phobias. Throughout the story, it is seen changing its form into various creatures and objects, including a werewolf, leeches, sharks, vampires, a giant bird, a mummy, and also the menacing clown that we all know of. In this way, it is able to feed on the emotions of fear and terror that it generates in its prey, becoming stronger and more powerful as a result. The shape-shifting ability of Pennywise is a key part of its power, and the entity uses it to keep its victims off balance and vulnerable to its attacks. As we know already, the entity manipulates and feeds on the fears of the town's children, leading to a cycle of violence and tragedy that repeats every 27 years. The town's residents are well aware of the disappearances and strange events, but are unable to do anything to stop the menace. In the novel, the origin of Pennywise is linked to a greater cosmic struggle between the forces of good and evil, and the entity is revealed to be only one aspect of a greater evil that exists in the universe. Now let's dwell on the awakening part of the entity. It and The Dark Towers are two series, and both are works by Stephen King. They are both separate stories and have two different universes, but in The Dark Tower, there's a character named Maturin. Maturin is a turtle cosmic being who is one of the guardians of the multiverse. Maturin is described as the being who supports transports the universe on its back and is responsible for maintaining the ultimate balance. On the other hand, it is referred to as the greatest enemy of the Dark Tower, the central axis of the universe. It is known as the powerful force of evil that preys upon the minds and fears of its victims. Using its vast yet wicked power, it disrupts the balance of the universe and brings chaos and destruction. The character of Maturin is connected to the story of It. Both of the beings are part of a larger cosmic struggle between the forces of good and evil that is central to the Dark Tower series. Maturin represents the forces of good and stability, while It represents the forces of evil. The connection between the two characters can be seen through abundant cross-referencing that is present in King's work. Characters and elements from one story do appear and get referenced in one another. The turtle entity remains to be a spectator of every event that happens between Pennywise and the Losers Club children. In the latest film adaptation, we get a few hints of this presence, like the instance when Bill finds a Lego turtle, and when they see a turtle while playing in the water. At some point in the story, the turtle is also introduced as It's brother, which indicates that It has been around since the very beginning of the universe, just like Maturin. Alright, so let's explore the various forms of It in the Stephen King novel. Presumably, there are about 32 different forms of this wicked entity in King's novel. So let's take a peek at some of them that are just straight up terrifying, while the others are used to manipulate the victims and trap them. Starting with the most famous appearances of It, Pennywise the Clown. With the bright red hair, white face paint, and ruby red lips, Pennywise's smile alone is enough to send chills down the spine. It has eyes that are dark and piercing, with heavy black eyeliner and long, thick lashes. Though the costume is usually colorful and gaudy with bright strips, polka dots, and ruffled collars, quite the fashionista, isn't it? But King was inspired to make this appearance based on Bozo the Clown, Clara Bell the Clown, Ronald McDonald, and also John Wayne Gacy. By appearing as a clown, it can draw its victims with a sense of false security, only to reveal its true nature once it has them in its grasp. It also takes the appearance of Georgie and Bill several times throughout every adaptation. Not only this, it is seen to be appearing as Eddie Corcoran's brother. His abusive stepfather is responsible for his murder for a mere reason, such as climbing on a garbage ladder. Then speaking of fathers, it is also seen to be taking the form of Beverly's abusive father. It transforms into the creature from the Black Lagoon, which petrifies Eddie Corcoran when he is hesitant about showing his report card to his father. Talking of creatures, it also takes the appearance of a giant bird, which almost looks like a large-sized crow, and it attacks baby Mike Hanlon. Oh, and don't forget the encounter between Richie and Bill, where it appears as a werewolf. This incident happens when they are in the mansion located at 29 Neibolt Street. Remember the street because it appears exactly here in another encounter with Eddie and takes the form of a leopard. Now let's focus on some of the more terrifying forms, such as the mummy from Boris Karloff movie, where Ben Hanscom briefly encounters a mummy figure who has some of the elements of Pennywise's costume. While we are on this terrifying subject, we cannot miss the crawling eye from the Hugh Beaumont movie. This form of It can be described as a large, disembodied eye that crawls on the ground and has the ability to see and perceive its surroundings. One of the other notable appearances is Dracula, who appears in Derry Public Library. Ben Hanscom encounters this terrifying form of It that has razor blades as fangs. Another appearance is a Paul Bunyan statue that is encountered by Richie and is referred to as the Giant. A female classmate of the Losers Club dies as she encounters a car crash. Her name was Greta Bowie, and It takes her form to encounter Eddie. Eddie comes across another form of It, which is taken after Tony Tracker, who is the manager of a trucking depot. It takes many different forms in order to feed on its victims' fears, and it ranges from creepy creatures to demised people. We also know that sometimes It even takes the form of living people and pretends to be them. Like when Beverly Marsh visits her previous house, she finds out that a person named Mrs. Kirsch is residing there. Mrs. Kirsch is just another form of It, who later on turns into a witch. Its fondness for taking the form of decomposed beings is also quite disturbing. Stan Uris encounters this form when It appears as a child's corpse who has drowned in the tower's water reservoir. These demised bodies are in a decomposing state. One other scary appearance is the decomposed corpse of Patrick Hochstetter. It is important to note that all three appearances are seen by Eddie at the trucking depot. Lastly, let's discuss the two ultimate forms of the entity, starting with the Deadlights. This form appears as a glowing, pulsing, and amorphous mass of energy. This form is its true nature and is considered to be a source of immense power and malevolence. The deadlight form can have a devastating effect on the viewer's mind, which can drive them crazy and even result in ultimate death. Despite its immense power, the deadlight form is, of course, vulnerable to some attacks and can be defeated if the right methods are used. The next ultimate form of it is the giant spider appearance, which basically appears as a massive creature with multiple legs and a bloated body. It uses this form to intimidate and terrify its victims, and to be honest, it is quite horrifying even to read about it. Despite its intimidating appearance, the spider form is not immortal, and it can be defeated when the victims overcome their fear. In the novel, the spider form is also notable for being the final form that it takes before being defeated by the Losers Club. This confrontation marks the climax of the novel and represents the ultimate test of the children's courage and determination in the face of the creature's evil. Exploring all the powers of this incredible creature, the frightening entity is capable of manipulating reality, controlling the minds of its victims, and feeding on their fears and sufferings. It is nearly indestructible, with only a few methods of defeating it as described in the novel. The only way to defeat it is to confront and face one's own deepest fears, which require immense courage and strength. Not only this, but one must also confront the entity in its true form, which is constantly shape-shifting and is a changing amorphous mass of shadows and lights that is beyond human comprehension. It holds the ability to control and manipulate the minds of its victims, inducing hallucinations and nightmares. It can also project its victims' deepest fears into reality, making their worst nightmares come true. This ability is used to control and manipulate its prey and ultimately results in them becoming isolated and paranoid. One of the other frightening aspects of it is its insatiable hunger. It feeds on the fear and suffering of its victims, and it will stop at nothing to capture and feed upon as many children as possible. Its shape-shifting abilities are anything but simple. It can transform and alter its appearance into many things. But what impresses us most is that it can even turn itself into something that does not exist in our reality, or perhaps any reality. This ability allows him to appear in multiple spaces at once and barely has any limitation of its own. The physical form also changes depending on who is seeing it. What that means is that its appearance can get more or less terrifying depending on the viewer's fear. Terrified enough? Well, come on, we are just getting started. It can create illusions that will not have any physical impact. The illusions it creates can be so lifelike that the prey will see, smell, and hear them so that all the senses are triggered to make it more realistic. Next up is its telepathic abilities. This power includes the ability of the entity to read the minds of its victims and communicate with them. It uses its telepathic abilities to control and manipulate the minds of its victims and trigger terrifying hallucinations and nightmares among the victims. It is also capable of scanning the minds of its prey, so it looks for the things that petrify them the most and uses this information to create convincing illusions that exploit their weaknesses. One might think that its telepathic ability is only limited to direct communication with its victims, but no, it is also able to broadcast its thoughts to the beings around it, thus allowing it to gain control of large groups of people and spread its influence far beyond. Not only this, but it can access more than just fear of one's mind. It can dwell on its victims' memories and experiences from the past and get a hunch for their weaknesses. With this knowledge, it can tailor its illusions to exploit the victim's fears, thus making its victims even more vulnerable and easy to control. If you think that its telepathic abilities end here, you're absolutely wrong. You should know that this ability is not only limited to the human mind. This entity holds the ability to communicate and control the minds of animals, machines, and other objects, so it can ultimately create a group of animals who follow and do as it wishes. There are a lot of instances when the Derry residents are quick to forget about the missing children and adults fairly quickly. In the film adaptation, we can see new missing posters being stuck over the old ones, and nobody bats an eye at what really happened to the missing kids. We think it is because it holds the ability to wipe out the memories of large groups of people. It also possesses telekinetic abilities that allow it to control control and manipulate and alter the physical environment. With this power, it can move objects and even change the appearance of them. This power is capable of being so dangerous that the entity can cause physical harm to its victims by simply crushing objects or even crushing people with the help of its mind. If you think about it, it's quite frightening as it can cause harm even from a distance, making it difficult for the victims to escape or hide. Now, let's talk about the power that it probably uses most. Yes, we are talking about its teleportation ability. This power allows it to teleport anywhere around town and move quickly. This is one of the reasons why it gets so difficult for the victims to escape from the grasp of the entity. It can appear and disappear and often surprise and frighten the ones it encounters. However, it is notable how he only teleports around the town. In the novel, Bill says that Derry is it, and it is Derry. It's probably because the entity's powers are restricted within the town. It can also create gateways to other dimensions and parallel universes, allowing it to travel through them. This ability makes it a truly fearsome and unpredictable opponent, as it can potentially access unlimited resources and bring terrifying creatures and entities from other realms. There are some vast number of powers this powerful entity possesses, but if you want more, we have some good news for you, because of course he can do more. It also holds plant manipulation ability, aka the chemokinesis ability. It allows it to create illusions and manipulate the victims by moving trees and plants in an unnatural way, thus creating a sense of unease and terror. The entity can also create maze-like configurations with trees, branches, and vines, which can ultimately trap its victims, making it more difficult for them to escape. In the encounter between it and Eddie, it is in the form of a leper. Multiple plants have died with only its touch. And note that it is not an illusion, as it remains that way. It can also manipulate the weather to make situations more difficult for its victims. For example, the entity can cause sudden, intense storms to occur at any moment, and it uses this ability especially during an attack. This power can be used to trigger something more extreme, such as tornadoes, blizzards, and even hurricanes. This ability can cause widespread damage and result in destruction all over the town. In a lot of encounters with the losers team, a storm occurs to make the situation more intense. In addition to its ability to control the weather, it can also use its powers to affect the physical environment, causing earthquakes, landslides, and other geological disturbances. This ability allows it to cause even more widespread destruction and terror, making it difficult for its victims to escape or evade the entity. The entity is also capable of controlling and manipulating the energy of the atmosphere. It can create powerful electromagnetic disturbances that can affect the physical and mental states of the victims.
Kiss me, as if it were the last time.
Can this deadly creature reproduce? Theories surrounding its reproduction abilities are largely speculative and not clearly stated in the novel or film adaptations. However, some fans have offered their own interpretations and theories based on the information provided in the book and its adaptations. So let's discuss some of the few theories which are somewhat close to being a possibility. Alright, so the first theory is that it is a hive mind. Some fans have concluded that it is a part of a larger species or hive mind that holds the ability to split itself into separate entities. This way, the entity can manipulate and control its victims better. The theory suggests that it may be able to spawn offspring or spawn other entities in order to maintain its power and control over its territory. Coming to the second theory, it is more around the idea of it being eldritch abomination. This theory is dedicated to the idea of it being an ancient and monstrous entity that exists outside the boundaries of reality. This theory suggests that it has always existed, with no origin or family history. The next theory is more focused on the demonic aspect. Some fans have concluded that it is a demon that has been unleashed upon the world in order to spread terror and destruction. This theory suggests that it may have been summoned by some humans or some other supernatural being. In this theory, it can reproduce by spawning other demons or corrupting humans, which will eventually turn the human into an it-like creature. Some other theories suggest that it could be a parasite that feeds on the fear and suffering of its victims. According to this theory, it may be able to reproduce by infecting others and transforming them into hosts for its offspring. Some fans have interpreted it as a shape-shifting entity that has the ability to transform into any form it desires. This theory says that the entity can reproduce by splitting itself into multiple other entities. Now, let's think about something that we notice at the very end of the story when it lays eggs. So maybe some of them can hatch. We don't specifically think that it has to mate, so perhaps he finished the mating process quite asexually. Ben from the Losers Club states that he probably destroyed all the eggs, but he does not go back to confirm if all the eggs have been destroyed. Another theory comes to mind that the turtle once described itself as the brother of it, who by nature are polar opposites. However, it is never made clear if they are blood-related siblings or just brothers who share extreme opposing natures. So to sum it up, the exact nature of its reproduction abilities is open to interpretation, so we'd love to hear what you think about it and what your theories are if you have any of your own. This creation of Stephen King is so powerful and complex that it is extremely captivating to the readers and viewers. Whether it is a hive mind, brother of the turtle, or shape-shifting entity, one thing is certain: it is terrifying, and it will show up in my nightmares every now and again. Can the it creature be killed? It is safe to say that King's legendary creation of this entity has petrified generations and also raised the standards of horror pretty high. In Stephen King's novel It and its film adaptations, the question of whether or not the titular creature known as It can be killed is a central theme. From a novel standpoint, It is an omnipotent entity which has existed since the beginning of the universe. After it came to our planet, it made Derry its home and continued to prey on the town's citizens. In the book, it is described as a being ancient and nearly indestructible who feeds on the fear and suffering of its victims. However, the Losers Club, a group of 7 children who band together to fight against it, ultimately weakens the creature. They ultimately destroy it by crushing Pennywise's heart, which ideally kills the creature's physical form for good. However, King's other novels reference the presence of it several times, which raises the question of whether the Losers could really even kill the entity. Perhaps they eliminated its physical form, but it will continue to exist in the macroverse as its original shape that mankind cannot comprehend. Its species is known as the Deadlights and originally originated in a void, so it is only reasonable to assume that it goes back into being in its true form. Now coming to the cinematic standpoint. In the 1990s adaptation of It and the 2017 film adaptation both portray it as a nearly indestructible entity that can only be defeated by confronting it with bravery and unity. The Losers Club can only weaken it when they gather their own courage and fight it together with the power of friendship and love. The same idea of the entity exiting its physical form and continuing to exist in its true form in the macroverse is highly possible even in this case. However, in order for the entity to survive on or outside Earth, it probably needs to consume fear. So is it possible that it will just starve itself to death in the void outside of the macroverse? One other speculation is that the entity may be able to manifest into other physical forms and re-enter the Earth. Despite all of this, the idea of causing ultimate destruction to it has to be through the power of love and friendship. I mean, regardless of how petrifying its forms have been, friendship and unity have been the main theme that King highlights throughout the story of it. And with that, we come to the end of our video today. It is widely considered to be one of the most terrifying horror novels of all time, and the film adaptations are also remarkable at the same time. So with the perfect elements of supernatural horror and psychological terror, Stephen King truly created a haunting world that we simply cannot forget. The entity, aka the frightening antagonist, really triggers the deep-seated fear of clowns among all of us. Of course, King's work is legendary, but with a build-up so slow that tense feeling throughout the events really get to us. So it's safe to say that it has to be one of the best and most iconic horrors of all time. So smash that like button if you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you guys, of course, next time. Until then, have a good one and be safe. Thank you, everybody.